Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. We are currently ripping up the last section of teak on the main deck of the ship. There's still a bunch of original teak in the superstructure that we'll get to in the near future, but this is the last area of the main deck. We're on the main deck port side between turret number 2 above us and turret number 1 further forward. So everything around this has already been ripped up and most of it has already been laid with new teak. A very common question we get asked is, where does our teak come from and what do we do with it when we're done with it? So, easy answer to this, the teak that comes up that's relatively solid, like this pile right here, we sell in the ship's store. There's a link to that in the description below. If you're interested in owning some original Battleship New Jersey teak, check that out. There's only 43,000 square feet of it, and we'll be finished this project within the year, so there won't be any more after that. So that is the short answer. Some of it does not come up as well as these chunks, and much of that has to get disposed of. It's just small splinters, things that can't be used for anything. Teak is a very oily wood, and teak splinters often get very infected if you get one, so we dispose of it. Where did it come from originally? We have bought all Burmese teak from the nation of Myanmar. We looked into buying locally grown Burmese teak. It is fast growth, so it's just as expensive, but it doesn't last as long. We looked into using Brazilian teak, and we actually laid a section of Brazilian teak on the deck, and within a year, it had all sorts of issues. It's really great in like your backyard deck where it's getting ventilated on all sides. Laid down as the deck of a battleship where water can leak under it or sit on top of it and cause it to swell, it does not work very well, even though it is cheaper. So the only option for us was Burmese teak. Fortunately, we were able to acquire all of ours before the president put in the ban on buying products from Myanmar because of the military junta that overthrew the democratically elected president there. So we're very fortunate to have everything we need now that we can't go back and get more from Myanmar. The teak that the battleship was originally built with most likely came from the British colony of Burma in India, where the teak was natively grown. Great Britain was an ally of ours during this time. Around when they're building this ship, this Burma is being occupied by the Japanese. However, I have a suspicion that the United States knew that they were building these battleships and had acquired an amount of this teak already for redecking all their battleships. We certainly know it was originally teak, and it's long-lasting, old-growth teak, so it had to have come from that part of the world. Now, throughout the ship's history, they redecked periodically. So roughly in this area over here, where we're about to get to, oh, actually, here's some of the weld marks here. There used to be a 20mm gun tub, and that was not teaked as originally built. And sometime during the ship's career, they went through and they reteaked it. So they probably did this in the early 50s. Likewise, in Vietnam, a fair amount of the deck was worn away from use or rotted, and they replaced it with teak at that time too. And I'm assuming that in both occasions they went to the original Burmese teak again, because everything we've been ripping up from those time periods seems to be teak. In the 80s, trying to keep the cost of the battleship program down, it seems like they didn't use as much teak to replace it on New Jersey. There are some places where we found that they replaced wood with whatever they had, particularly around where they made the extensions to the missile decks, back aft around the aftermost gun mounts, Mount 55 and Mount 56. That has a lot of pressure-treated wood and plywood and other things that, like, not nearly as long-lasting. There are other places where the teak was rotten or worn out and they just covered it with a rubber roofing compound. If you look at this aerial shot of the ship's fantail, you'll see that it looks like there's this big black patch that's covered back there near the flight deck, and it looks like that's been ripped down to bare metal. No, they still needed the teak for insulation, so they put this Band-Aid essentially over it, the rubber roofing compound, and that got the ship through her last couple of years of service, with the deck continuing to rot underneath of that, with all the moisture that's trapped under there. Missouri had it even worse. If you look at this aerial view of her, you can see that practically her whole fantail is covered in this stuff. By the time Wisconsin is reactivated, they do buy teak and redeck the whole ship. However, on us and Missouri, the patches that they make are either different materials, such as the wider edge pieces, or laminate materials. So a lot of this area of the deck that was patched up, they used 1.5 inch, probably Douglas fir, and 1/2 inch teak laminated on top of that. So they're trying to do these cheaper Band-Aids. One idea that they had that we actually found in a June of 1982 article from when New Jersey was being reactivated was to, get this, they had to rip up a section of the teak on the fantail where they were going to put in the flight deck. They wanted to reuse that teak to do patches. And the article says that, oh yeah, that's what they're going to do. Well, you know, we've found no examples of older style World War II era teak with the 1980s era prep work done under it. So for example, we know when a board is from the 80s. Look at this strake right here that's green. That's a zinc silicate primer that was laid down when they did patchwork. You notice how it is not like that on either side. This board was ripped up at some point in the 80s, and a new board was put down, and we can see exactly where they treated the deck and painted it. We know that that's an 80s board. And we know that the stuff around is not from the 80s. Well, none of those boards are the older World War II style that have different size holes and stuff like that. And we have certainly found, in our experience, pulling this up, it doesn't come up in good enough shape to reuse again. It does not. For example, look, this board came up mostly intact for this, what's that, about 5-foot section. We're using 8 to 12-foot sections here, and this is all messed up, and you've got existing stud holes here. And maybe you can reuse those, but it's not great. Any one of these you look at is going to show some sort of damage. This one's splintered all along the side from where they had to get under it to rip it up with crowbars. Like, it doesn't come up in good shape. And so we think, despite what this article says, that they certainly did not find that they were able to do that. That said, even though it doesn't come up in these nice 8 to 12-foot sections that can be reused as patchwork, it does come up in perfectly great shape to use for other things. We've had folks buy this and use it as bar tops. We've had folks buy this and use it as to make pens, and it's perfectly good for that. You can plane down a couple of the edges and get some good stuff out of it, just not these full-size 4-inch wide by 8 feet long boards. And if you have an interesting project idea for some of this, remember, it is available in our museum store. There's a link in the description below. All the money you put into buying some of this artifact teak will go back into the deck project, which we are still trying to complete, so that we can then start funding the drydock project, which is our next major capital project that's already begun. So buying this stuff, buying anything from the link to the store down below, helps support the museum so that we can do these critical projects. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to continue donating to support the ship, and a link in the description below if you'd like to buy some teak and support the ship. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about us in the museum. Thanks for watching.